Kia ora everyone, and welcome to Money and You, an initiative of the Financial Services Council that aims to grow your financial confidence and well-being. And what better way to do this than to share some personal stories and lived experiences. Our guest today is a powerful young leader, a champion for equality, a Pasifika advocate and financial mentor. She's had an incredible journey and some important messages to share, not only in relation to financial well-being, but also how you can uplift yourself and your community. So I'm very excited to welcome Latayvia Tualasea Tautai to Money and You.
Talofa, Clarissa, and anyone listening or watching. Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to have you. I wanted to kick things off by asking you to tell us a little bit about your journey and your story so far. How did you get to where you're at today?
So my full name is Latayvia Tualasea Tautai, which is a very lengthy name. But also for me grounds me for where I come from. So I'm Samoan. I'm the second generation of my family to be born in New Zealand. So in Samoa, we're from the villages of Solo Solo and Levi Salemua. So that's where we're from. So I had quite a complex upbringing. It was pretty tough. So I was raised in a single parent household and we were dependent on the main benefit. So I was raised by a solo mum, but also by a village of an extended family, mainly from factory working kind of backgrounds, so labour intensive work. So a lot of them working overtime so that I was able to focus on my education. So going through school, that was something that was always at the back of my head, was that the stationery I have, my auntie had to work 12-hour night shift for this. So I better focus and I better do well. So that was a lot of pressure and I didn't tell anyone about it at school. And then I just kept working hard. I kept kind of using the values I learned at home of like servant leadership. I was head girl of my high school, got the scholarships, got in like a youth award for leadership from the New Zealand Youth Awards, and I was on the Welfare Expert Advisory Group, and those are all really cool things. And but I think for me, as someone who moved 14 times growing up, we were in a women's refuge at one point. For me, it's the journey that I've gotten a lot more from rather than like the accolades that are coming now, because this is after all of the work that myself and the village have put in. So I definitely am not where I want to be because I'm only 23, I'm a baby. But I definitely know that I have the core values instilled in me from my family and from my community that I want to help set me up for the future. So that was a long-winded answer. But for me, I would say I am an intersectional feminist. I'm faith-centered, so my faith is really important to me and my family, and those are the guiding values that I go by.
That's amazing. Thanks for that introduction. And it's, incredibly inspiring. Even at 23, I think you've achieved so much. So, hats off to you big time. I want to ask you about financial well-being and kind of what that means to you. And you talked a little bit about, learning from other people, and it seems like you really learned to value the things that you did have. How has that all contributed to the way that you view, I guess, money and your financial well-being as part of your overall well-being now?
Yeah, so I think personally, financial well-being to me is something I've only recently kind of thought about. So when I entered university, I had to kind of start from scratch, and that's not uncommon. A lot of us grew up without having examples of financial stability, so we've got to create that ourselves, and that's through no fault of their own and the people raising us. They're just trying to keep the lights on. So I think in going to university and creating habits to set us up for the long run and for financial stability, and that's kind of what well-being means to me, and also using my financial well-being and knowledge that I'm gaining slowly to move from survival mode to thriving. And I think that's something that a lot of wāhine especially can relate to, and especially people in Pacific and Māori communities when you're trying to create intergenerational wealth for the first time, you know. So I think that's something that's important to me in this space. So I work as a financial mentor at a Pacific social service, and a lot of the time I'm working with families, and we're kind of providing ambulance at the bottom of the cliff kind of support. But we also provide financial literacy courses in high schools. And when we're going in, we don't go in with a deficit mindset, you know. We understand that they're facing a lot of socioeconomic hardships, but we also understand that they have aspirations and dreams. So while we're also talking about watching out for loan sharks, we're simultaneously talking about saving, buying their first home, what that means in a Pacific setting, or buying a home with your siblings and having that as extra income, you know. And these are concepts I've never heard of before, and a lot of them not even knowing about KiwiSaver. So I think financial literacy, understanding at a basic level, and then building on that understanding, I think, is kind of my interpretation of financial well-being. I hope that answered your question, Clarissa.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm really curious to know how you actually got into that work to begin with as a financial mentor. How did that happen?
Honestly, to be honest with you, I kind of just fell into it. You know, I've done a lot of volunteer work. So I volunteered in Mount Eden Prison since I was 18, at the Auckland City Mission. In high school, ran stationary drives for our wāhine at Wiri Prison. So community has always been really important to me. And then I found myself in summer, at the end of a semester, looking for work. And usually I have an internship lined up. I've done corporate law, public policy. That summer, I was kind of stagnant, you know, because I spent a lot of the time fulfilling family obligations. We had someone very close to me pass away, and I was very involved in the funeral. So I didn't really have the time to set something up for the summer or set something up for my semester of employment. And then one of my friends, or kind of a mutual friend, she texted me and said that a place that she works at has a job opening, and she thinks that the skills I have could benefit the kind of role. And she also said could be something that contributes to the community. So she hooked me with the community part, and I applied for the job, and I kind of shared that I wanted to come from a strengths-based space in terms of finances. And I think for myself, I'm still learning. I'm only starting to learn about investing and all those things that I'd never heard of before uni. But yeah, that's how I fell into it. I've done a couple of FinCap trainings, and then just learning from the community, and then taking my volunteer work into it as well. And then just learning from the financial mentors at the Pacific Social Service I'm at. A lot of them have been in the workspace for like 30 years. So they've got so much wisdom and knowledge, and you know, when you hear their lived experiences and dealing with the community and with the high needs community, it's just so invaluable, and I'm so lucky to learn from it. But that's kind of how I fell into it. Yeah.
I also really like to know, like, some of, I guess, the challenges or the issues that people come to you with, in terms of the conversations that you have with people in your work as a financial mentor. What are people sort of struggling with the most at the moment, do you think?
Yeah, I think we can all agree that COVID highlights social inequities. So right now, it's a lot of the basics. It's a lot of food parcel support, you know, food voucher support. A lot of people are in arrears and needing advocacy. but also WINS advocacy we do quite a bit of. So a lot of people don't understand the system, MSD, and they don't understand what they're entitled to. And often they lack confidence to ask for what they need and also what they should be getting and what they deserve. So that's what we see a lot of in the day-to-day, even without COVID. It's just there's been a higher volume of food requests and food parcel requests, which is heartbreaking. So we deal with a lot of people who are about to get their cars repoed. And so we sort out low payment plans while we help them with budgeting and sorting out their finances, but also highly aware that you can't budget people out of poverty. You know, that's just, I think that's a myth. People aren't getting enough money to survive, let alone thrive, whether it's the working poor that I come across quite often or people who are receiving the benefit. So, yeah.
So what should we do then if, you know, because there's a lot of, I guess, I don't want to use the word advice, but like tips out there and, you know, how to budget and all of that kind of basic stuff. But like you said, you can't budget your way out of poverty, right? So what do you see as being the solution, if there is one?
I think there's no one single solution that would work, but I think something that could prevent a lot of people from getting into these crises is financial literacy in schools. And we've heard that from many people, and our organisation has called for it as well. And the fact that we're providing it in courses in like six classes isn't enough. For example, when we went into a Decile 1 high school and we asked 71 students whether they had a savings or FPOS card, only 3 of them put their hands up. So our education system is failing our young people, and they're leaving school without real life skills. So I think it's really important that that's embedded into the curriculum and that it's compulsory rather than currently I think it's optional. So I think campaigns that mandate the government to add financial literacy into the core curriculum, I think that could make a huge difference, because you don't know what you don't know, you know? Yeah, and encouraging living wages, things like that. But it has to be cross-sector. There has to be a commitment across the sector to address poverty. You know, it's education can't be making changes without MSD making changes as well. And then flowing down into financial services and organizations, there also needs to be a commitment to diversifying your offices, but also having a diversity in thought involved at board levels, you know, and that flows through with our organization. We're not just Pacific in label. We have a Pacific woman as our board chair, and a Pacific woman as our CE and as our team leaders. And we have people who aren't Pacific as well working in our organization. But I think it makes a huge difference when values flow through and lived experience is understood at every single level. So I think making a genuine commitment to D&I is important, and not just having one-day seminars about Te Ao Māori, you know, and I think we've all been there. We've all been in those cringe kind of meetings where they're trying to teach us 3 sentences of te reo and thinking that that's enough, you know. So I think actually following through on like commitments that we make in our offices is really important. But yeah, I think those could make real differences to communities.
I'm wondering, do you also think that we need to diversify our approach to financial education in terms of, you know, having this a blanket approach to everybody in New Zealand versus tailoring the education towards certain communities or certain groups of people?
Definitely. With our program, we actually ask the students before we head in, we give them a form to fill out what do they already know, what do they want to know, and what are they hoping to get out of the course, so that we as mentors hold ourselves accountable. So we're going in and we're aiming to teach them about these topics that a lot of them wanted us to teach them about. But we're also not going in assuming that they know absolutely nothing, you know. But I think tailoring your approach to a school, to groups, to demographics is really important. But also understanding that groups are not homogenous, you know. Just because you're heading into a group of Pasifika doesn't mean that you're going to have the same approach every time, because there's different age brackets, different levels of education, different language language proficiencies. Like, it's very different. So I think when you have people at the center of the work that you're doing, that makes a huge difference. And we've seen that in tangible ways when we've presented our program. And I think that goes for any kind of program that you're trying to present, is that when you tailor it to a community and involve them, that they get way more out of it. So I think that is really important, to customize financial literacy and information and make it more accessible. That's so key, you know. A lot of us, even terms like remuneration and those kind of things, coming out of university, it's the first time you're kind of hearing these or having these conversations. So I think having those conversations earlier in high school and kind of breaking that stigma so it's less awkward to have conversations about money, because there's a lot of taboo around money and how much you've got. So I think that's a massive barrier for a lot of people too.
Did some research recently, and we looked at I guess the differences between wāhine in New Zealand and, you know, that this kind of gender gap that exists, in particular in relation to financial well-being and confidence and financial literacy, or things that you've mentioned. And it was really interesting to find that, I guess probably not surprising, but women in general, we rate our financial well-being, our confidence, our literacy much lower than men do. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that. Is that just wāhine going, you know, rating themselves and thinking, oh, we're terrible, and writing ourselves off? Or is there something real there? I'm interested to get your view.
Yeah, definitely just my opinion, but I think it really depends on which wāhine that you're asking, you know. I think in general, even though we're doing an amazing job, we'll always undersell ourselves. So I think that that plays a part in this kind of we always say, but this like tall poppy syndrome kind of thing in New Zealand. It's even harder for women because we're kind of battling with being seen as like bossy or too much, you know, if we back ourselves and if we're confident. But if that's seen in men, then they're leaders, you know. So I think that plays a part in acknowledging whether we're doing well financially. And I think also it's never enough for us because we've always got to work twice as hard as wāhine. And so when we're doing well at work, we might not think that we're doing well in our family life or in our social life. And we're constantly trying to balance so many things, and we always think that we can do more and that we should do more. And I think it also goes back to attaching our worth to our productivity. And I think that's something that plays into the question you've asked, Clarissa, is breaking down or separating our inherent dignity with our capital and with our productivity. That's an important conversation to have. Yeah, I think for me, those would be the main things.
Now, you've talked a lot about your work as a financial mentor, and my question for you is if there's someone watching or listening that might be struggling at the moment and thinking, I do need a bit of help with my finances, but I don't really know how to start or where to go. Where should they start and where should they go? And what actually is a financial mentor? It's probably a question I should have asked at the beginning.
Well, good. So financial mentors, we basically support people, walk alongside people with their finances. So the first thing we ask people at my job is, how can I help? Rather than putting the onus onto the client. It's more that we're there to serve you, and how can we support you in your aspirations, and we create goals. So it's creating financial goals, whether it's an immediate need that we're addressing, like car company advocacy or WINS advocacy, or whether you're wanting some support with figuring out StudyLink and how to apply for student allowance and things like that. So it's kind of tailored to the individual that we come across. And we also present a financial literacy course in the community. So that's kind of the role of a financial mentor in like my capacity. And we go into WINS sometimes for clients who don't feel comfortable or have felt unsafe with WINS in a WINS office. And we get food parcels and those kind of things. So that's what we do in that space. And if you are needing that kind of support, then there are different services available. So if you just look on the FinCap website, they'll have a list of different kind of budgeters or financial mentors that are available throughout New Zealand. And there's different like Pacific Social Services, Māori Social Services, and there's also places for those who are struggling with mental health as well. And a lot of these organisations also have wraparound care. So in our service, we also have social workers and community connectors and counsellors, because it's not finances also impact every other aspect of your life. So I think reaching out through there is important. But I think for young people, sometimes going out and calling is hard. So even starting off with like financial literacy podcasts and like there's a few Instagram pages that are really helpful, and I can send those through to Clarissa to hype up. But those kind of podcasts and TikToks and those learning about financial literacy on your own, so you don't feel as embarrassed before you reaching out to someone, so you might have a bit more of a grasp on the vocab, but also you should never feel embarrassed for trying to better yourself and trying to grow in that space. But I know there can be stigma.
To approach a financial mentor, to get involved, obviously Instagram pages and TikTok and podcasts and things are free to listen to. If someone wanted to approach a financial mentor such as yourself, is that a free service or do they need to pay? How does that work?
Yep, it's free. Yeah, it's free for anyone really. We have people who are non-Pasifika as well as our clients. Just if there's a need, reach out really. Yeah, but reaching out can be hard, so we hope that we can meet people halfway sometimes through like social media and opportunities like this too, to reach into communities. But yeah, it's completely free, so don't worry.
That's awesome. A couple more questions for you before we wrap up. What's the most important money lesson that you've learned so far, if you can pick just one?
Yeah, that's a hard one, but I think Probably a meeting in the middle in regards to like my cultural obligations and my personal goals. You know, finding a middle ground, and I don't always get it right, but I think the most important thing that I started doing, and I wish I started doing it when I first started working, but in university, was separating my pay when it comes in, rather than just having this lump sum and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have this money, but instead separating it into, it's so basic, but into like my bills, my savings, my emergency, you know, and then like my summer fund for holidays, you know, and like separating it quickly and then having that leftovers and okay, that's my money, you know. But I also have a Latayvia account, so that's for like non-Samoan people. That's kind of when you gift money for funerals and weddings and birthdays within your extended and immediate family. You're often asked to show support, and when your family is going through it as well, other families will show support to you. So I think having that prepared and having that ready before it happens has been so helpful. But it's such a basic thing that when I teach the high school students, they're like, what? I never knew you could separate your accounts. And I was just like, I'm glad you know earlier than I did. You know.
It's amazing once you realize that, right? You're like, suddenly I've got all this money for different things.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than just like spending as you go, and then you get to a couple of days before pay and it's just mega ring noodles. So, you know, we want to live in thriving mode.
One final question for you, Latayvia. I'm just wondering if you have any tips for people watching or listening, in particular young wāhine, who might feel like, they do need a little bit of a helping hand when it comes to money matters. What would you suggest?
In terms of advice that I would give, is I recently heard something that resonated, and it was about finding what you love and then also seeing if you can find a way to make a living off of that, or make a life out of that, if you can do it. But I also understand there's a lot of people who are wanting to survive as well. So money is more a means to create that stability. So looking for innovative ways to make money as well. Like, we're young, there are different ways that we can invest, and innovative ways to do that, not just by yourself, but with your family as well. So getting your whānau financially literate, and then seeing what you as a family can do together and create plans, I think is really important, and being a part of a collective and using that power. But I also think what we spoke about earlier is not attaching your worth to your productivity or to the amount of money you have. It's more a means to create stability and intergenerational wealth. So then it doesn't hit you as hard when you make mistakes, and you're not kind of burnt out because you're like, oh no, like I don't have this amount by this time, because you eventually will get that amount, you know, but you've just got to take some L's, you know, and some lessons. But yeah, it's just like a constant work in progress. And I think the wisest people know that they know nothing, you know, and like I feel like I'm constantly learning, and like a sponge. I'm like, oh, I'm ready, you know. So just keep your mind open to learning. But then if there's anyone who's older listening to this as well, there's so much to learn as well from our young people in terms of being innovative about money, and to listen as well, which is really important. And I think mentoring doesn't have to be one way. It doesn't just have to be our elders, or not elders, that makes you sound like 100, but you know, our youth adjacent community, and people in the financial space as well. As mentors, they've got a lot to teach us, but also have a lot to learn from us as well. It's not just transactional. It can be reciprocal relationships where we can learn to kind of approach money in innovative ways. So those are the main lessons, but I went on a tangent.
I really like that message around, we're always learning, and that you're always learning. And I feel like there's probably a lot of people out there that think, I'm never gonna know everything. And no, you're not. And I don't think there's anybody out there that does know everything when it comes to money and finances. But it's, as long as you are open to learning and, innovating and thinking differently. And I think that's probably the most important thing, right? We just keep learning.
Yeah,
always
definitely.
Something to learn. Great, really great tips and messages there. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and some of your personal story and also some of the work that you do. As a financial mentor. I think it's really going to help a lot of people, and I'll make sure I pop the links that you mentioned in the description of the video if anybody wants to check them out. So thank you again, Latayvia. It was really, really great to have you on Money and You.
Thank you so much, Clarissa. Whakataitila lava. I really appreciate the space that you've created to allow people to come and share. So thank you so much.